Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of r/Entitled Parents. In today's episode, AITA for breaking my fiancé's family tradition by naming my son what I wanted? Update, AITA for breaking my fiancé's family tradition by naming my son what I wanted? My in-laws started harassing me for destroying their family naming tradition. Update. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. AITA for breaking my fiancé's family tradition by naming my son what I wanted? Throwaway because I have in-laws on Reddit. Myself, 25F, and my fiancé, 27M, have a 2-month-old son. We are overjoyed at being parents, but most of my in-laws are refusing to even see our baby because of a decision we made concerning his name. My in-laws have a tradition of giving the firstborn son of every generation the same name. Let's say it's Peter. This has been going on for about 7 generations already, and they're very serious about it. My fiancé's eldest cousin was the latest person to get named Peter. Every one of his cousins has only had daughters so far, so our baby is the first son of his generation, and consequently should get the name. I have no problem with the name Peter, and would have been okay with naming my son that. Unfortunately, that was also the name of my uncle, who died before I was born. I won't get into details, but it was tragic and traumatizing for my family. My father never got over losing his younger brother. My grandmother asked the family not to name any of our future children Peter during her lifetime. My MIL and FAL knew about this promise, and at first seemed to not only be okay with us avoiding the name Peter, but also supportive of the one we chose. However, my grandmother sadly passed away when I was 7 months pregnant. We traveled for her funeral. On our last days there, my in-laws called to offer me their condolences. Then my MIL asked me if I was willing to think about the name Peter now. Suddenly, they were insistent that the name we chose was awful and we had to honor their tradition. According to them, they had only agreed to make an exception for us for my grandmother's sake, and had no obligation to keep it now that she had passed. My family agrees that while it's true we don't have to avoid the name anymore, it still doesn't feel right to use it. My fiancé agrees with me as well, but his parents spent the last weeks of my pregnancy trying to convince us to change our minds about the name. When our baby was born and we named him what we wanted, my in-laws were furious that we had broken a 7-generation-old family tradition. Some of them hadn't previously wanted to name their sons Peter, but did it anyway for the family's sake. They said our decision was selfish, and that my family should have moved on by now. This has truly nothing to do with whether my family has moved on or not, it just felt like a betrayal to my grandmother and uncle's memories to even consider using the name. My FIL offered us $1,000 to change our son's name to Peter after he was born. That was 2 months ago, and neither of my fiancé's parents have met the baby or seen us since I was pregnant. Most of my in-laws are on their side, and this is causing a huge rift between my fiancé and his family. He assures me he's fine, but I'm starting to feel really guilty about this. Aita? Edit. The tradition started, as far as I know, when OG Peter died and his son, also named Peter, named his firstborn after his father. Peter III ended up having the first son of the following generation, and did the same thing. That one died before having children, so his sister gave the name to her son, and so on. The name Peter is very common in my country, so none of them ever got bullied over it, and the fact that it was also my uncle's name isn't as unlikely as one might think. Also, middle names aren't used in my country. Most people get the maternal surname before the paternal one instead. NTA. After 7 generations, I think it's time that their family moved on. I've always been surprised it even lasted that long. Tradition equals peer pressure from dead people. NTA. Family name traditions are weird, and you can do whatever you want and name your baby whatever you want. Keep pushing that I'm honoring my late grandmother's final wishes hard so they see how unhinged they sound asking you to flop that. NTA. Just because they named their kids a name they didn't like to keep up a tradition, doesn't mean you have to. He is your son, you guys name him whatever you want. As an aside, once again, tradition is a euphemism for misogyny. Note only male children have a special name, and all the female children were not fought over, presumably no one cared what they were called. All the more reason to end this now. At 7 generations removed, Op's son probably shares less than 1.5% of their DNA with the founding Peter, because all those women who married into the family brought their own DNA and weren't just empty vessels waiting to be filled with Peter's potent seed. NTA. Some hadn't wanted to name their kid Peter but did it for the family's sake. Have you broken a pact with Satan or something? NTA. You are never an asshole for naming your child something that you want, unless the name is really stupid. But even so, you have that right because it's your kid. Tell MIL that she can get a puppy and name it Peter if she cares so damn much. But most of my in-laws are refusing to even see our baby because of a decision we made concerning his name. Good. Lunatics should never be around babies. Or kids. Or me. Or you. Seriously? Do you live on the set of Dynasty? Ugh. I'm sure you're looking forward to the day you decide to go and see. Congrats and good luck with the pregnancy. NTA. Tradition is just peer pressure from the dead. NTA. Update: AITA for breaking my fiancé's family tradition by naming my son what I wanted? About a week after my post, my fiancé's parents contacted us. They apologized for their behavior and begged to meet my son. They said they were ready to leave the naming debacle behind and truly wanted to be involved in their grandson's life. We were skeptical, but invited them over to meet the baby. The visit went well. They began coming over almost every day during the next 3 weeks. I noticed neither of them ever called my son by his name, but I didn't point it out. For the first time in months, things seemed good between my fiancé and his parents. One day, my fiancé was helping my FAL with something at our place, so my MIL and I went to the park with my baby. Sometime later, I had to go to the bathroom, so I left him in the stroller with her. When I got back, she was sitting on a park bench, chatting with a woman who was cooing over my son. I went over there and introduced myself as son's name, S-Mom, and she said, I thought his name was Peter. I didn't say a word, and neither did my MIL. She followed me to the car and we went back to my apartment. On the way there, I texted my fiancé about what had happened. The moment we got there, he kicked both his parents out of our place. He'd read my texts and confronted his father. Thankfully, my FIL is a terrible liar, and confessed immediately. Apparently, both my in-laws only call my son Peter. That includes whenever they're talking about him, every time they introduce him to someone else, and even baby talking to him on the few occasions they were left alone with him. Neither of them are embarrassed by this, and they both think they're in the right. We're heartbroken. Especially my fiancé. Not only because his parents can't let go of their pride, but also because the name we chose for our son means a lot to us both. I blame myself for encouraging my fiancé to allow them near our son. I was raised in a different city than all my grandparents, and always wished they could have been more involved in my life. Losing my grandmother didn't help. Pretty much every doubt I had only existed because I thought it would be important for my son to grow up with all of his grandparents around. But now, all my guilt is gone. If they can't respect my son enough to call him by his name, they don't deserve to be in his life. I hope they enjoyed the 3 weeks they had with their grandson. Because that's all they're getting until they get their heads out of their asses. Edit: I thought I'd clarify some things. First of all, I'm not comfortable sharing my son's name here, but I promise it's not a unique name or anything like that. It's perfectly normal and popularish in our country. Secondly, I mentioned this in the comments, but while my family didn't try to dictate me on my son's name, they would never be comfortable with it. My uncle Peter passed almost 3 decades ago, but it forever changed everyone who knew him. My grandmother's wish might seem a bit irrational, but it was motivated entirely by grief, and it didn't seem right to disrespect that just because she's not around anymore. And to whoever PM'd me that my fiancé's only on my side to keep the peace, he didn't want to use the name either. Months before I got pregnant, he told me he hoped one of his cousins would have a son before we did, because he always hated the tradition and sympathized with my family. He's just as angry at his parents as I am, if not more. Also, most of his cousins and some other relatives have come around and apologized. His parents are unhinged. This reminds me of the story that went around a while back where the in-laws tried to have their grandchild's name legally changed behind the parents' backs. You have a perfectly valid reason for not using that name, and I bet much of the rest of the family is sighing in relief that this dumb tradition has been broken. I think you've made the right call by going no contact here. Naming traditions in general are ridiculous, but disrespecting the parents and misnaming the baby is unconscionable. I'm sorry that they are the way they are. But I think the most important thing here is that you and your son are happy and healthy. You have your husband by your side, and you will live your life without feeling guilty whenever someone out of your family says your son's name, and you won't see the heartbreak in their eyes every time. I'm sorry OP you lost your uncle. I did too 30 years ago to a drunk driver. My uncle died instantly, but the drunk person died on the way to the hospital. Nobody used his name until my aunt had a baby and used her brother's name as a middle name. I bet that some of those parents who didn't want to go along with the tradition but did to keep the peace with the family are so happy and maybe a bit jealous of you standing up for yourselves and stopping it. My in-laws started harassing me for destroying their family naming tradition. Update. My son is now 5 months old, almost 6. We're still in C with my fiancé's parents, who haven't seen us since May. We've both blocked them everywhere. His relatives who were on our side still are, and most of the ones who weren't haven't come around. If anything, they're even more pissed now. I remember someone suggesting that my fiancé's family might stop using the name after we decided not to. Well, you were right. Last week, one of my fiancé's cousins announced she was pregnant with a boy. She included her baby's name in the announcement, and it's not Peter. What followed was a string of aggressive Instagram DMs from both MIL and FIL. They both created accounts for the sole purpose of contacting me. I didn't see them until 2 days later. They sent me almost an hour worth of voice messages about how I'd ruined their family. They wished their son had never met me, that he'd see me for who I truly am, and that I'd never gotten pregnant. Many of the messages ended with "I hope you're happy now," as if they thought they were getting the last word, only to think of something else they wanted to say. There was name-calling, an accusation of me cheating, and the persistent refusal to refer to my son as their grandchild. My fiancé and I listened to the messages together. He hadn't gotten any. As much as I tried to distance myself, I was in tears by the time it was all done. I still don't regret anything, especially after the stunt they pulled back in May, but I'm not completely free of the guilt yet. Not to mention their complete disregard for their grandson. I was already having an overwhelming week, and this just seemed like the final straw. I must have spent close to an hour sobbing in my fiancé's arms. Once I was calmer, he unblocked his parents just to scream at them for a while. I only heard his side of the conversation, but it was more than enough. He finished the call by saying he didn't want to hear from them again. We had a long talk afterwards. My fiancé opened up about the emotional blackmail by his family before and after my pregnancy. My in-laws were close to threatening him with anything they could if we didn't name our son Peter. I told him about my guilt and how awful I feel for putting him through this. We reassured each other, cried a bit more, and had a mostly pleasant evening with our baby. We contacted his cousin. The family is giving her shit for breaking the tradition again. They're being way less aggressive though, and I think many of my in-laws are finally learning to let go. We're not expecting any apologies anytime soon, but we'll be glad if they come. Our wedding will be in September 2024, and whoever doesn't give us a sincere apology until then is uninvited. My fiancé's parents are banned either way. We came to that decision together. Also, I'd like to address some comments on my previous update about how I was letting my family's trauma win, or how the name wouldn't be hurtful now that my grandmother has passed. I can't stress enough the damage my uncle's death caused. He was only 30 years old. He had a fiancée, a great career, and his whole life ahead of him. I don't know many details about what happened, because I didn't want to upset my family by asking. My grandmother wasn't the only person hurt by this, my entire paternal family was. And if I remember correctly, the person responsible isn't even in jail anymore. It was more than 20 years ago, but the wound never truly closed. So yeah, I think it's safe to say the tradition is over. The next Not Peter will be here in January, right before my son's first birthday. It was never my intention for this to turn into such a shitstorm, but I'm so incredibly proud of my little family. Thank you so much to everyone who shared their stories and offered advice during these last few months. I'll be forever grateful for all the support I got from y'all. Wow. That's all there really is to say here. Good on you for going NC with your fiancé's family. This is a completely ridiculous request, and their behavior doesn't warrant them the right to be in your lives. The naming decision is between you and your fiancé, no one else. My guess is that if it wasn't this first name thing, there would be another hill your in-laws would choose to die on. Also, interesting they expect you to just get over the name, but they can't let it go on their end. Seems a bit hypocritical. Enjoy your wedding and only invite the people who you want to be there. Congrats on 6 months of being a parent. Stay in contact with the cousin, though, for mutual support. I find it astonishing that they value the name of a child more than their relationship to their son and his family. I can't wrap my head around it. Of course, the in-laws can be disappointed, but they escalated this minor disagreement into a nuclear shitstorm which wrecked their bond to their son and his family beyond repair. I think that control has a lot to do with the extreme reaction from the in-laws. They didn't react as much to the name, but to lose control over their son. My mother's large Italian family was like this. 7 brothers who each had multiple children, and every single first boy was named Tom and every single first girl was Mary, not the real names, and there were literally dozens of Toms and Marys in the family. They were called by their first and middle names, i.e. Mary Ann, Mary Marie, Mary Phyllis, Mary Catherine, and Tom, Tommy, Tommy Michael, and on and on and on ad nauseum. All because the great-great-great-grandparents were Tom and Mary. It was asinine. My mother's generation broke the tradition, thank God. And as far as I know, everyone still talks to everyone. Because, you know, we're all adults. This is the longest and most intense saga I've seen for such a small thing. I'm sorry you have to deal with these crazy, abusive people. I hope you can be free of them and enjoy your family. Good job to you too. I think Not Peter is a perfectly appropriate name and what he should be called forevermore, on Reddit at least. Congrats for standing strong. I can only imagine how difficult this has been. I'm so glad that you and your fiancé are united on this issue. I find it so bizarre that his extended family values a silly naming tradition over a living, breathing child. Or that anyone thinks they have a right to dictate the choices you make for your child. What an awful family, to value a name over their own grandson. They are insane. They picked the wrong bill to die on. Opie, enjoy your fiancé and your baby, and appreciate the members of fiancé's family that are on your side, the only correct side. Good luck with your wedding and enjoy the in-law free time. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.